Welcome to the August 2022 CIECAST, Autonomous Vehicles, Fact versus Fiction. I'm Paul Berry, Executive Director for CIECA. The Collision Industry Electronic Commerce Association, or CIECA, develops and promotes electronic communication standards that allow the collision industry to be more efficient. We also provide webinars like this one to help educate both members and non-members on trends that impact systems, processes, and the exchange of data across the industry. Today's presenter is Tara Andringa, Executive Director of Partners for Automated Vehicle Education, also known as PAVE. As we start the webinar, I want to remind everyone there is no verbal communication between the participants and the presenter. If you have questions during the webinar, please type them in the question panel on the webinar screen. We will answer as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. Well, welcome, Tara. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'm so excited to be with you today and to talk to the audience. And I do love questions, so please feel free to write any questions you have, and I'll be sure to leave time to answer all the questions you send in. I'm excited to talk about PAVE and a little bit about autonomous vehicles. And what we find is that a lot of people are very confused about what is the reality, what is on the roads today, what is not on the roads today. So I wanted to just walk through some of those common confusions and misconceptions. Wanted to start with a little bit of a walk through automotive vehicle history, and I wanted to be honest up front here. It is a very scattered history. I am not looking to be encyclopedic or historically exhaustive. I'm just going to give an overview of some of the highlights of how we got here. We really could start very early. As early as the 1920s, they started talking about remote controlled cars. So this is going to be kind of an odd leap through history, and I'll skip multiple decades, but just wanted to mention some highlights. This is from 1957, and what I partly love about this picture is that the family is actually playing a physical board game, so they clearly imagined a self-driving car, but they did not imagine iPhones. So you actually have children interacting with their parents and not staring at a device. But so as early as the 1950s, they were really imagining cars, without a driver on the highways. We then go forward just a few years, and this is from 1961, when they were imagining a car without wheels. I also think this looks a lot like and I'm aging myself here, but a lot like the Jetsons with the bubble vehicle and no wheels, and you feel like the person should be George Jetson and his dog Elroy. But so again, another just kind of imaginative prototype of what a autonomous vehicle could be. So this has been going on for a long time. But then I'm going to fast forward many decades to when it got real. And the DARPA Grand Challenge, and the DARPA is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, arm of the Defense Department. They started this Grand Challenge. The idea was they wanted to spur the acceleration of development of AV technology that could be applied to military requirements. So they held their first contest in 2004. They offered $1 million prize, and the course would have gone across the desert. No one actually completed the course, so the money went unclaimed. The following year in 2005, they had 5 teams compete on the course, and it was like 132 miles across desert terrain, and a team from Stanford University won the $2 million prize. DARPA is a really significant, I think, true starting point of the AV industry. A lot of the current leaders and kind of groundbreakers in the AV industry got their start in the DARPA Grand Challenge, and a lot of academics as well. So I think it's interesting to remember that it really came out of the defense industry, and that's where we kind of see a lot of the beginnings of where we are now. After that, things really took off. And so again, I'm going to then fast forward another decade. But in 2014, SAE started realizing that not all autonomous vehicle technology is created equal. That we really, and it reminds me a lot of what you all do as well, that you really need a common language to speak to make sure that everyone is talking about the same thing, that all parts and orders and you know, you're being consistent. And so SAE took this huge step, and it was really a game changer. That realizing that there are things that certain technologies are capable of, but that's very different than a full self-driving car, and that as an industry, we needed a way to distinguish between, you know, advanced technologies, but truly autonomous vehicles. So they developed J3016, and within the industry, it obviously allows developers to have a common language. Now, we'll come back to this in a few minutes. I just wanted to mention that this was a significant, significant point in history. And then obviously everything kind of took off, you know, with lots and lots of developers and parts makers, and everyone is familiar with the Gartner hype cycle. This is a more recent one from 2020. I think they first did their AV hype cycle in around 2015. So as SAE was developing their levels, the industry was going crazy, and there were new sophisticated technologies and lots of new companies getting into the game. Huge progress was being made, and we kind of think of 2015 and to 2016 as peak hype. Nearly everyone was predicting widespread deployment of self-driving cars by 2020, and we have been on a roller coaster ride ever since. Obviously, those optimistic views of, you know, self-driving cars that could go anywhere, everywhere, that everyone would have by 2020, the idea that, you know, children born then would never drive, have not happened, and we've kind of the hype cycle has come back down, and I think people started getting more realistic. But you know, again, the last decade has been quite a ride. So then the question is, what does the public think? Like, what do, you know, when we were predicting, you know, fully self-driving cars, and when we're looking at new technologies now, it's important to keep in mind that not everyone thinks this is great. And we, as at PAVE, and we have had a lot of partners, have done a lot of polling. This is from a poll we did last year, and we teamed with MIT and JD Power. And we asked people, what is the maximum level of automation you would be comfortable with? And as you can see, and this type might be small for you to read, so I'll kind of walk through it a little bit. We saw the numbers were quite different for people who have cars with some active driving assistance versus those who didn't have any. So the lighter blue is people that currently have vehicles that have some advanced features, and then the blue is that they have not had exposure to it. But it kind of will go all the way down to the bottom. For full self-driving, only about 10% of people who don't have current driving assistance features said they were comfortable with that. And, you know, just shy of 20% even for the folks that did. So what we realize is, by and large, people aren't sure about the technology. They, you know, when you really look at their comments, they say, I don't understand it, I would never get in one, I don't trust it. Whereas the industry thinks we have, that the technology has huge potential. So where that takes us is to the great divides. We have cars and technology and you know, research and development happening very quickly. And then you have the public who really isn't sure, doesn't know where, you know, what they think about it, if they would trust it, if they could get into it. And so that's when we get to my organization, PAVE, and our mission is to connect these two, to try to give people exposure and trust and build trust, you know, again, and let the industry and stakeholders speak to the public. So we try to be a bridge to help bridge that chasm. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about PAVE and what we do. We're a 501c3 nonprofit, purely educational, and that we run a public education campaign with the goal of helping to create an automated vehicle future that increases safety and mobility and efficiency and sustainability and equity. And I wanted to just show you our members, and I don't expect you to be able to see all this. And the point is not to memorize all the members by any stretch. What I like to point out here is the diversity of people involved. And it's, again, very similar to the collision industry in that you have all of these stakeholders who all have a critical piece of this puzzle. And so as you can see, our members, it's everything from Ford and GM and Toyota and Volkswagen, big OEMs, nonprofits like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, the National Federation of the Blind, National Council on Aging, and then a lot of parts makers and safety groups and other consumer groups. So it's a really, a broad collection of organizations and companies that have come together to try to speak to the public. So you look at these groups and you say a lot of these have nothing in common. How do you find common ground? And so I'd like to think of it as PAVE members have two key beliefs that they share. My computer suddenly. Belief number one is that autonomous vehicles offer potential to improve, as we mentioned, safety, mobility, equity, sustainability of our transportation system. And I'll mention this a few times, but I really like to underscore the word potential. It is not that AV technology automatically, if we get autonomous vehicles, that the world is going to be better. It's that if we're really thoughtful about this, if we, again, bring in all these stakeholders and go about it a smart, constructive way, the technology has the potential to make our transportation system better. So that is the first belief that we all share. And then the second key belief is that public acceptance is critical in order for us to reach those benefits. That even if we have the greatest technology, if everyone says, I don't trust it, I wouldn't get in it, we'll never reach those potential benefits. So again, our members all want to believe in the potential and want to bring the public along and have a conversation with the public. So how do we do that? And what our polls have found is that the two things that really move people are exposure and knowledge. The more people that know about the technology, the more they trust it and the more exposure they have. If people have had a ride in it, if they've witnessed it, if you kind of take it from being this hypothetical thing, like we were talking about the Jetsons, about, are they flying vehicles, and really make it real and let people ride in the in a vehicle and experience, and that's how we build trust. We often joke, we've done a lot of demonstration rides. That's one of the main things we do. And sometimes we'll give people a ride in a vehicle, and you think usually you give people an experience like that and you want them to get out and say like, oh, that was so amazing. But what we actually consider a huge victory is when people get out and say, it felt just like riding in a car. It stopped when it was supposed to stop. It turned when it was supposed to turn. And, it's almost like people sometimes say that was kind of boring. It just felt like a car ride. But that's the whole point. That's building trust. You want people to get comfortable with the technology. So what we do is we have a conversation with the public. And we do a lot of different things. We provide facts to empower people to join the conversation about the future of transportation. We want to demystify the technology again. So we don't want people thinking these are flying vehicles. Really try to help explain what the technology is, how it works. And then we also talk about use cases. People I think automatically think about passenger vehicles, but there also is food delivery, freight and trucking, and then AV technology is often also used, in construction and mining and, ports and agriculture in countless different ways. So we really try to open people's minds to what AV technology can be. Now, we do get people say, are you trying to boil the ocean? That trying to move public opinion is a huge task, and that's true. But one thing we like to point out is the case for public education. And the Click It or Ticket campaign, which again was a joint effort by industry and government, all these people coming together, speaking in one language about a huge road safety issue, drastically changed seatbelt usage. Now, I want to be careful because it's a very different thing. Click It or Ticket was asking people to take one tangible action, and there was a clear repercussion. Click it or ticket. And I understand that obviously understanding AV technology is much more complex than that, but just the point is, there are a lot of different instances where this has been. And another actually example is the whole designated driver campaign, that we really tried to address drunk driving by introducing the concept of a designated driver. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, no one ever knew what that term was. It wasn't thing, and now it's like people's like, who, you know, it's like, who's the DD? It's just another example of a, you know, a road safety issue that has become widely understood and has really changed behaviors. So that's our hope. So then the next question is, what is the status of AVs today? And this is a long and complex answer that I will walk through. So we talked a few minutes ago about SAE levels. This is kind of the same idea of SAE levels, but NHTSA put this out, and that they just updated this last year. And they took SAE's levels from level 0 to level 5. I know it's impossible to read this teeny tiny print, so I tried to kind of simplify it and boil it down. Level 0 is just momentary assistance. The driver is fully responsible for the car, but just for one moment. Like if you're trying to change lanes, your car can send you a warning. If you're about to get in a crash, there's automatic emergency braking. So 99% of the time, the driver is fully in control. Your car can just have momentary assistance to help with the driving task. Level 1, the driver is still responsible. But the driver assistance features can help with acceleration and braking or with steering. So things like lane keeping assist or adaptive cruise control. Unlike level 0, where it was just momentary, this the whole time you're driving. Lane keeping assist is on. Adaptive cruise control, the whole time you have cruise control on, it's moderating that, so it's a longer term driver assistance, but you are still in control. Level 2 then can handle both of those, additional assistance with both acceleration, braking, and with steering. Again, the driver is responsible. That's the huge common denominator with all of these. An example is like Highway Pilot, that the car can handle more of the driving task, but the driver is still responsible. Level 3 is perhaps the most complicated one because it is conditional automation. The system can really perform, you know, the driving task, but the driver still has to be available to take over. And I think that that's what can be really confusing to people. Now, very importantly, there are no level 3 vehicles available for commercial purchase in the US. So it's still kind of a hypothetical thing. It's not something you can go to the car dealer and buy. But so the car can really do most of the driving, but it does require, you know, the driver under certain circumstances to be able to take over. We then get to level 4, which is high automation. The vehicle really does all of the driving tasks within set surface areas. And what's key here is that the vehicle cannot operate universally. Now, there are some cases here in the US now happening today, you know, Waymo in Chandler, Arizona, Cruise in San Francisco, cases where there are deployments with people from the public can go and ride in a level 4 vehicle. They can only go within that set area. These cars are not programmed or designed to be able to drive anywhere, but the car is fully driving you. And then level 5, which does not yet exist, is full automation, which is the vehicle does everything, can operate universally under all conditions on all roadways. It's not just in a set area. But then over to on the far right here, I put the things that I want to scream from the rooftops because these are really the most important things. All vehicles available for purchase today, no matter how cool and sophisticated the technology is, all require an attentive driver. Any car that you buy at the car dealer today requires a driver at all times who's in control of the vehicle. And cool cars can do amazing things now that really do help both with consumer convenience and to keep our roads safer, but the driver is still in control, which is where a lot of crashes happen, unfortunately, with people misunderstanding that. Level 4 vehicles, which can handle the driving task, have limited deployments and are not yet available for purchase. Like I was saying, in Las Vegas, San Francisco, Chandler, Arizona, there are a number of places where you can ride in a level 4 vehicle, but consumers cannot own those at this point. And that level 5 automation, which I think a lot of people imagine, you can get in a car and drive across the country and it can go anywhere, that does not yet exist. So that's kind of the most important summary, the most important takeaways here. And so then when we look at where we have all of these levels of automation, one of my favorite quotes is from Mary Barra, the CEO of GM, and she talked about the difference of evolution versus revolution. And evolution is when we're going up through those levels, that cars are getting more and more and more sophisticated, and eventually we'll get to the point that they're, really handling the driving task. Whereas some companies are looking at a revolutionary approach. They're not even looking at the human sort of in control. Like I said, it's a complicated situation when the, humans, I think, get really confused about what is my role here. It's easy to not pay attention if you think, oh, the car can mostly, drive itself. So a lot of companies are then taking the revolutionary path. They want to build from the ground up a car that is designed solely to be the driver of the car. So I think that's a helpful concept to think about in understanding kind of the levels and the difference between the lower levels of automation, which require a human driver, and then the upper levels of automation, which, like we said, the car would be the driver. And then just kind of again, we're still talking about what's available now. So we have 32 states that have laws on the books right now permitting some sort of AV testing or development. California is the leader, and they offer permits. So right now in California, there are 48 companies that have permits to do testing with a driver. There are 7 companies that have permits to do testing without a driver. And then there are 3 companies that have permits to actually do deployments, to take people from the public and rides in a car without a driver. Also, AV trucking has really skyrocketed. Again, we've been talking a lot about passenger vehicles, but as of last year, 8 startups had raised $1.4 billion for self-driving trucking initiatives. We have seen, in our organization in PAVE, that has been our biggest growth in the last few years is AV trucking companies. And from a public education perspective, the reason I think it's so important is I believe that for a lot of people, their first exposure to AV technology will be with trucks. And so it's a different kind of trust. Instead of getting used to, trusting being in a vehicle, it's trust with sharing the road with, these huge heavy vehicles. So that's PAVE's interest in the trucking space, but it's really just grown like gangbusters. And then also, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but there are a lot of industries: construction, mining, port management, agriculture, defense. All of these are using AV technology to try to improve safety and efficiency. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the potential benefits of AV technology. And again, and I know I said this earlier, but it's just something I really believe. I really want to highlight the word potential. PAVE's part of what one of our biggest pieces of our mission is to cut out the hype. I'm not here to tell you that AVs will solve all of our problems or that any of this happens automatically. If what we do is just let a lot of self-driving cars out on the street without any thoughtfulness about how to do it well, we will not make our transportation system better automatically. So part of what PAVE tries to do is to encourage this conversation between all of these stakeholders to make sure that the system that we're developing really does make our transportation system better. So I'll kind of walk through these a little bit. In terms of safety, we have 40,000 highway deaths every year, and a lot of those are caused in part by human error, things like distracted driving and fatigue and impaired driving, all of which an autonomous vehicle does not do. Again, does it make it perfect? No. But we really do believe that the technology has the potential to improve road safety. And I think one of the greatest possibilities of AV technology is mobility. 25.5 million Americans have disabilities that make traveling outside the home difficult, and that's everything from vision impairments, physical impairments, mental impairments, older Americans, a lot of different reasons why why our car-centric culture isn't working well for people. And so obviously AVs have the potential to offer new mobility options for a lot of people. Sustainability is one of the more complicated ones, again, because if we just create a lot more cars with combustion engines, we aren't making our highway system more sustainable. But vehicle emissions are the #1 source of air pollution in a lot of areas. So again, things that go along with AVs, electrification, shared use vehicles, if we can reduce crashes by, again, improving highway safety, then we can reduce the idling that comes as a result of crashes. So again, I think the technology has the potential to improve our sustainability of our transportation system. Equity is another, I think really important issue. Again, a lot of people are not well served by our current system. And I think this technology has the ability to serve more people more effectively. And in terms of PAVE, what we've thought about a lot are things like food deserts, rural users, people for whom, owning an automobile is not possible, either because it's too expensive, whatever it is. So we really do think that, again, that AV technology has the potential to improve equity. And then efficiency. Obviously, where we see this a lot is, things like ports, agriculture, to help processes run more effectively. Another example that I love that I've heard people talk about, I'd met with some folks from the parking industry at one point, and they were talking about how an AV can park so much more efficiently than a human. Like if you look at parallel parking, I think they said it was like 1/3 less space that the car needs in terms of maneuvering, which for one parking spot doesn't seem like a lot, but if you look at that over an entire city, the amount of land use that can change is really staggering. So again, in so many different ways, there's a potential to improve efficiency. So those are just some of the potential benefits that we see for the technology. So then the obvious question is, how do we get there? And I wanted to just highlight a few of the things that we think are really important. One is public engagement. We talked about this earlier, but exposure to the technology, we love getting people in vehicles, providing demo rides. I think the more exposure that people have to the technology, the more that they seem to trust it. Education, again, cutting through the hype, making sure people have facts, all are super helpful. Clearing the Confusion is an effort that PAVE joined with a bunch of other organizations. So it's JD Power, AAA, the National Safety Council, Consumer Reports, I'm sure I'm forgetting some. All of these organizations came together, and the idea behind Clearing the Confusion was there are so many different names that different manufacturers use for the same things. So for example, I think it was automatic emergency braking had 40 different names that were being used commercially, which makes it really difficult for consumers who are already confused. This is already new technology. It makes it really hard for them to understand, to compare apples to apples. Does this vehicle have the same thing as this vehicle? So we came up with a standard nomenclature that we have really been encouraging the industry to use, and that's called Clearing the Confusion. So this is all part of our public engagement initiative. Another key piece is of getting to the AV future is focusing on facts. And I don't want to point out any one group, and so I'm going to name two. I think in terms of the manufacturers, I think truthful marketing is important. Right now, we see names that are really confusing to people, that suggest that even though the car can't drive itself, we have a lot of names that suggest they can. And I really don't want to just pick on Tesla, but the names autopilot and full self-driving to a layperson can really suggest the car can drive itself. When you go on their website, it says in small print, of an attentive driver is required at all times. But I think truthful marketing is really important. And then media education is also a big piece of it. And this is a story from the New York Times, which says a fatality in a self-driving car forces Tesla to confront its limits. The danger, again, is that Tesla is not a self-driving car. And so I think there are two dangerous things about this. One is that it reinforces to people that a Tesla is a self-driving car. And again, I'm not trying to just pick on Tesla. this happens with the media with all different sorts of advanced technology vehicles. But so the first problem then is that it reinforces the wrong information about what a self-driving car is. And then secondly, and this is kind of the longer term thing, because this is calling a level 2 car self-driving, it then hurts trust in real self-driving cars. When we get to the real, when fully autonomous cars are really actually available, people think, oh no, that's not safe. I read about that getting into a crash. So again, it just further hurts public trust, public confidence. So we have a whole campaign to work with the media to try to, again, ensure that they're using correct terminology, getting facts right, and also really encourage companies and corporations to use language that, the car does what it says, what they say it'll do. And then lastly, partnerships are really important, and that's kind of where you come in. It takes a village, and just like with your organization, you try to bring in all of these different, people from or groups from, across the ecosystem. Successful deployments with AVs really involve the full ecosystem. So it's companies, it's regulatory bodies, it's law enforcement agencies. And there are a lot of players, again, the manufacturers, the insurers, the regulators. So what we try to do is bring together all of these organizations to encourage collaboration. What we at PAVE do is really similar in that we are trying to help the ecosystem work and to get everyone talking. So we were hired, and this is the last kind of thing I wanted to talk about, is so we were hired by the AV Pooled Fund to start an AV forum. And I will actually have a whole slide to talk about this. So the AV Pooled Fund is 8 states that all joined together. They realized that they were all trying to do similar work. And so they thought, instead of duplicating all these efforts, they thought it would make sense to pool funds to work together on some of these projects. And so one of the things they wanted to do is to create a website where, and it's not just these states. So these are the states in the AV Pooled Fund, but they want to include every state. Where states and industry and all of the stakeholders can come together to have a place where they can share resources and network and discuss lessons learned, discuss collaboration. And I'm actually breaking news here because we just named it this week and just bought the website on Tuesday, and it's going to be called accelerateav.org. But if you go to that website, it is not there. So warning there. But so in this website will launch in the summer of 2023. It'll be free to all AV stakeholders, again, funded by the AV Pooled Fund. But we are hoping that this will be a place where all of these different stakeholders can come together and try to forge partnerships and find the best ways forward, so that we can reach the potential of this incredible technology. That is all I had to share. I want to leave some time in case anyone has any questions or anything they'd like to discuss. I would be happy to do so.
Well, thank you, Tara. Stacy Phillips, which is CIECA's marketing director, has been monitoring the webinar for questions. Stacy, do we have any questions for Tara?
Yes. Our first question is, what is the best way for the collision industry to share important information with public sector transportation departments?
Well, hopefully the forum that I was just talking about is going to be a great way. And I know you all do your own, a public sector collaboration as well. But we encourage you to come. You can come to our website, pavecampaign.org, and just sign up for updates. And we will keep you posted when that forum launches. And so we really, and we are, like I said, we are literally in the process right now actively of designing it. So I would love to have a whole section on, the collision industry and keeping those conversations going and how that fits into this whole ecosystem. So yeah, I would encourage you to all get involved in that conversation. Again, it's going to be free, open to everyone, and would love to ensure that that's part of the conversation.
Thank you. When do you think we'll see fully self-driving vehicles?
So that is the most common question we get, is everyone wants to know when this technology is going to be real. And this is related to what I talked about a little bit earlier in the program, but I think the better question than when will we see them is where we will see them. And as I mentioned, there are some places where right now you can go and ride in a self-driving car. And I think that will keep growing, both the physical space, like, right now Cruise has a deployment in the city of San Francisco. I think the outlines of those areas will keep growing, and the number of places where you can, see those deployments will continue to grow. I think we are a long way off from when we get to the point where you can just get in a car and, like you can today, go on any road, go on any teeny, back way path. I think it's called the ODD, the operational design domain of vehicles will keep increasing, but I think we will be at level 4 vehicles for quite a long time is my expectation.
Thank you. Our next question and comment is from an individual who says, I would love a website where the definitions and terminology are compared for all brands and caveats for each brand. Do you have a resource that like that you have considered, or someone else who has done that?
That is a fantastic question. And I'm going to give you 2 different websites, and I don't know if either of these will completely meet what you're looking for. First, PAVE's website, which is pavecampaign.org. We have a resource library that has over 900 resources that we've vetted, so you will find a lot there. Actually, I'm going to give you a few other places. NHTSA, under the US DOT, has great resources as well. But the other website I love is one called My Car Does What. You can type in, and this is it's through the University of Iowa and the National Safety Council. It was a partnership that they started. If you go to My Car Does What, I believe it's .org. I think it's mycardoeswhat.org. You can type in any vehicle, and it gives you a very clear list, again, comparing apples to apples of all the functionality of each vehicle. So love that website as well. So those are several to try. And again, my email is up on the screen. If you have any other questions along those lines, please just send me a note. And if I think of others, I'm happy to share them.
Thank you, Tara. Our next question, with all of the different segments of the collision industry on our call today, what advice do you have of different ways to build trust with AVs?
So, that's a good question. I like it, and I'm actually going to quote someone else. So Chris Urmson, who is one of the founders of Aurora, which is a AV developer, I heard him ask this question once: how do we build trust? And his answer was, we have to earn it. And I think that is so true with this technology that we're asking people to get into this vehicle, put your lives, the lives of your family and your loved ones and your children in this vehicle. We can't just tell people trust it and we're going to flip a switch and you'll trust it and that's great. People have to be comfortable with it, which is why we really encourage, again, opportunities for people to ride in cars. We really try to do a lot of education in terms of, I used this word before, but demystifying the technology. And I don't mean by that, we don't expect people, to be just like very few people can, open their hood and give a thorough explanation of a combustion engine. However, people generally have a pretty good idea of how their car works, and you hit the brake and the car stops, and you hit the turn signal and it notifies people around you that you're preparing to turn. I think similarly, we can't expect people to just say oh, get in this car and it'll take you where you want to go. People need to understand, the kinds of safety mechanisms that will help to keep them safe. I think of the sensors, and this is way oversimplified. So, this is just when I'm really talking to the public. I almost think of an AV as a human. That we have 5 senses. We have sight and hearing and touch and taste and smell, and all of those things put together help us to navigate the world. And AVs, similarly, it's not like they have one thing. They have cameras and LiDAR and radar and all of these different sensors that together, the whole sensor stack that allows an AV to explore its environment. And so we do a lot of events where we have whole exhibit spaces where the public can come and kind of explore. And one of my favorite things is some of our LiDAR makers have like actual virtual reality helmets that people can put on, and they see LiDAR, they see how the car sees, and it really helps you to understand, wow, the car is frankly seeing a lot better than a human. So again, this is a long answer to that question, but I think how we build trust is we earn people's trust. And I think as people, the longer that, by the time AV technology is widely available, it is going to be the most tested technology in the history of the world. I mean, millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of miles of testing. And yeah, again, I think the more that people know about that and the testing process and the way the technology works, I think that's the best way to build trust.
Thanks, Tara. Are there any fully autonomous vehicles in use today in limited geographic areas like ports or college campuses?
Yes, there sure are. So again, 3 companies in California have permission to be deployed. Waymo in Chandler, Arizona is deployed. Those are passenger vehicles. Also Neuro, which is one of PAVE's members, which is a food delivery autonomous vehicle. Yeah, like you said, on college campuses, there's several campuses where you see various, either shuttles that take students or delivery vehicles. There absolutely are. Again, but when we say fully, and I know I talked about this, but I just want to underscore again, when we say fully autonomous, these are vehicles that can completely handle the driving task, but they are, and the question suggested this, but they are limited to a geographic area. So yes, within a hospital campus, a college campus, a construction site, whatever it is, a city, there certainly are fully autonomous deployments, but I know I sound like repetitious, but those cannot be purchased at dealerships. No single person can go and buy an autonomous car at this point. And at this point, all of the deployments are vehicles that are limited to a certain area.
Excellent. So what advice would you give to collision repairers and collision shops on how to prepare to repair AVs?
So that is an excellent question also. And I think that your organization can play a huge role. I know you have all of the standards and the common nomenclature and common terminology, and that's going to be such an important part of AVs as well. I know for repair shops, it's going to be a whole new education about how all the parts work. And another common question we've gotten when we started dealing with cities is they have the same kind of question from law enforcement. They're like, how do you pull one over? If one of these is in a crash and it's empty, who do you get the information from? So I think it's just going to have to be an ongoing, I don't mean this to sound like a cop-out answer, but I think it has to be a long-term dialogue that we have, and I think this is hopefully part of what our forum can do, is allow regulators and policymakers and industry and insurers and all of these different stakeholders to have those kinds of conversations, because you're right, it's an entirely new world that we're going to have to navigate.
Thank you. That's all of the questions that we have for now, but this will be recorded and Tara's provided her email address, so thank you.
Absolutely. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to have conversations and answer any further questions that anyone may have.
Great. Well, thank you, Tara. Very much appreciate you taking time to meet with us today. I'd like to point out this presentation has been recorded and will be available later today at CIECA.com. I would invite you to check CIECA.com for a schedule of future broadcasts and to watch recordings of past webinars. Links are available under the CIECAST tab at the top of the page. CIECA has partnered with the Automotive Management Institute. Attendees of this webinar are eligible to receive credit toward a professional designation from AMI after taking a short quiz on its website. A link will be available to all attendees. Please follow CIECA's social media platforms to stay up to date on upcoming events and CIECA news. And that concludes today's webinar. Thank you.